Hi, everyone. It's really great to see you. My dream, my biggest hope for this event, when we are actually leaving here in an hour, is that we don't only talk, but we actually at least try to formulate some ideas and some concrete suggestions to one another, because we are not pointing fingers, but really to leave with some new ideas of what can be done. So maybe before we start and go through the topics that we have actually prepared, can I invite you to spontaneously reflect on some of what was said before during the first panel, because probably you got inspired by that already, and we want this to be the conversation. Any volunteers, or shall I point at someone? Super.
I can volunteer, for sure. It is true what has been said. My name is Petra Bijvoet from the... Oh, you can see me now right now. That is great. It is true that there is a lot of capacity within the cities that is missing. We are now having the support from a financial team. And I heard a very good example of the city of Leuven, that they now have a financial architect contracted. And I think that is very important, because we don't speak as cities the language of the private finance institutions. And we need to learn a lot about how to deal with multi-benefit business cases, place-based finance, finding solutions for many, many issues that occur within the district. So it is something that we are not really familiar with. So we have to change our mindset. We have to learn. We have to think to overcross silos within the municipality, but also within the national government. And I think also with the European institutions, you have to think a lot broader. So yes, that capacity issue, that was really touching me. That is, I recognize that is something, an issue that we are dealing with. Yeah.
Thank you, Petra. Okay, Marcin, go ahead. Maybe just one introductory, or just to step in for a second, because what I hear very often is that there are a lot of options. It doesn't sound too bad, right? When we talk about finance and energy transition, there are programs, initiatives, there are interested investors, etc. And if we are only in panel discussions with certain groups of panelists, it sounds a little bit different than when we join a different panel. And that can be a little bit confusing, and that's always the most fascinating part for me. Like, okay, so there are so many options, and there are. It's available, it's on paper, it's on website, right? So why do cities struggle?
Yeah, so maybe not to start with, does it work? Okay, no. I think maybe not to start with the barriers, but I think that's exactly what I wanted to mention. So the both sides are right. So we had a panel about the availability of funds, the stream of funding, the huge amount of different sources, etc., etc. But at the same time, it is so inconvenient for the end users to use that fund or to leverage the options, that it is, both sides are right, but at the end, we are not aligned with the goals and options. And for example, European Recovery Fund, it's a good example. The amount of funding available was huge. I mean, the pool was so big, but at the same time, the deadlines were so tight, or the compliance to be filled were so stricted, or the rules or the bureaucracy, that a lot of that funding will be saved, unspent, basically. And now we should discuss a bit more about that unspent funding, and if that could be, I don't know, redirected to the cities again in the coming years. So I think that's a fantastic opportunity today to hear from one end the funding owners and how to use that. But at the same time, I think we will elaborate a bit today about the barriers and what could be done to make the things more convenient, and maybe how to cope with the bottlenecks that we all struggle with.
Thank you, Marcin. Vlasta, I'm looking at you because you have a very unique perspective. You are a mayor, a CEO of an energy company, energy agency. You are a very experienced mentor, working both with us and in other initiatives. So you have worked with lots of municipalities, cities, smaller and bigger across Europe. What is your observation on what is actually needed? Are innovative financing options actually already attractive enough, but there are some barriers that seem to be quite easy to address once you do it, or is it very different across Europe?
Yeah, firstly, yes, I have many hats. I'm also a member of Committee of Regions, so I heard a lot that I have a colleague here, so I'm sure that we will change the barriers and move it forward. Because I'm always operative person, I always look at the solutions. So I think there are all the cities, small and medium and small villages and the bigger one, they have a lot of ideas how to do it, what to do it, but they are a little bit afraid to make pilots, to test, to experiment. And we promote for many years that you have to test, you have to promote the new solutions, even if they are smaller ones. So I think many barriers, communication, learnings, capacity can be changed or can be removed when you do testing. But it's not easy, because when the cities say, I will test something, there is the next question. I have a ministry, they have to approve my test. And here I also found that this could be also a solution. You know that European Commission, through different options, different DGs, structural funds, give this technical support to ministries. And yeah, they have it, but they don't have exact indicators. All cities we know, when we are in the project, we have to have indicators to follow. And I know some projects from Slovenia that they have used these technical solutions for, or technical assistant, to develop the green bond system that could be used by municipalities. And municipalities across Europe are waiting for this, guidelines. How can I really, as a small or a big municipality, use these green bonds in a way that is according to the all rules and stuff like this? But the ministry is doing this for years. Many we have tested, and some countries and some regions already have this implemented and they have results. But some others, they are still at the ministerial level. So the solution is, can Commission a little bit push also ministries to show some results after some years? Because we already have a good experience on this. In Slovenia, there was a big barrier about the energy performance contracting in 2010 and 11 and 12. We were all talking about the legislation, the procurement, the ESCOs. And then finally, we had some very good person at the ministry responsible for energy. And they said, we have to make clear guidelines. So let's step together, Ministry for Finances and Ministry for Energy. They sat together for 3 months, and the guidelines came out. And we spread these guidelines across Europe, and many cities said, oh yeah, they are very good ones, because there is a clear information there. To which account I should put these spendings? Is it off balance? Is it on balance? And it's very clear, and it's stated as our ministerial level said. And then we have a boom effect of the EPC, and we have a lot of very, very good examples. So I think this is this combination that we have to put together. Peer-to-peer learning and testing, because without testing, you don't see where is really the problem. If you ask from the first side, everyone will say, yeah, we don't have money. But we have a saying in Slovenia, if the money is a problem, there is no problem. And usually, this is true when you go very deeply, where is the exact barriers, then you find it. So I think just this bottom-up and top-down, yeah, and we will be there. Thank you.
And can I ask you also on this, so how did you make this difference? How did you actually go from those pilot project examples to the ministerial level, which resulted in some new guidelines, etc.?
You know, we have 7 energy agencies in Slovenia. We are a small country, only 2 million, so 7 energy agencies is quite a lot. Altogether, I will say around 70 to 100 very experts, people knowing the public sector and knowing also the issue with the energy and climate. And we work together as a consortium. So cooperate with peers. I think, and then sharing this knowledge, and we are within these agencies of different knowledge, of different genders, of different political options, and we all push our ministerial level, lobbying, doing everything that we change a little bit. We also work together very closely with ESCOs, because I think knowing the ESCO, what they are thinking about, how they are doing, it's really crucial. Because especially Eastern Europe and Southern and Eastern Europe, you know, the countries that in the history they had a different political systems, they don't like public-private partnership. Because at every my city council when I presented, they said, no, 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 we don't like private sector. They will take all our money to their pockets. And so this was this historical cultural prospect of the viewing how this is working. So we went for a very small project. It was sort of the interacting for only 1 boiler room to show them, you know, this would be the savings and there will be only 5 years payback period. And the councillor said, oh, this is funny, it's only 5 years. And then we take the bigger one, we said, okay, there are 3 boiler rooms and there is 1 small ESCO private company. And you see, we are reporting to you every year to the Ministry for Finance, to the City Council, and they are not taking your money. It's even better like you would take the grant or a loan from a bank. So we compare this. And I think this is how we pushed and grow and come today to the many very successful project.
Thank you, Vlasta. Marco, you have experience mainly in renewable energy communities, and this is what you have been sharing with us and with the mentees. And you've also have a bit similar experience in terms of contributing to improvement of regulations that then allow municipalities to use this particular scheme more often. Could you tell us a little bit more about what it used to be like, the main challenges, and then what solutions you have proposed that have actually worked and those that still need to happen?
Yeah. Thank you, and thank you for the invitation today. And yeah, we are colleagues because I work for an energy agency and we face similar challenges, but also we approach similar solutions. In terms of energy communities, we in Italy had probably 4 years, almost 5, in implementation from the EU directive to the Italian national framework. And we started to work on energy communities before the regulation were in place. So we worked a lot in Emilia-Romagna region, for example, with 15 pilots at the same time, led mostly by municipalities, so the most difficult framework that you can expect in energy communities. And the regulation came out and still are not in place. So also the grants were not used in Italy. We have 40% recovery and resilience plan available. That's not been used much. So after a while working on the ground, the ministry looked around for help, and now we are starting a project for one-stop shops that helps the diffusion and the adoption of these measures, and also the incentive scheme that it's in place. And that's just the kickstart, because then I agree with most of the dialogues we had before. The private sector needs to be included, but also the municipality needs to be shielded somehow, because there is a risk for private sector to take all the advantage from both incentive schemes and also the taxpayer money that the municipality use for paying their bills. So I think the role of agencies it's really important to be the kind of membrane between the private and the public sector that leaves some space for the private sector to work with municipalities and help them go through the fear of working with them, but at the same time, there's no space for taking profit out of it that is too much. So I think that's the key point. And also I want to add up on Mr. Merola before. I think it's crucial to have replicable models because tailor-made, we do it every day, but it's too slow. we need to faster up the solutions. And as I said before, we had 15 pilots altogether, and we tried to apply the same methodology, working with the renewable energy communities, and we saw the benefit of it. And now we have, now in Italy there are like 80 energy communities and already set up. Probably the double up is coming, and it's an escalation expected. And municipalities are in place because they found in the same place, and they had someone to support them that was objective and not linked to the market as many other consultants would be. So that's my key takeaway from this, the first part of the discussion.
Thanks a lot. And I really like it that you brought up the issue of having a proper way of securing the city's interest when working with private sector, private investors. So Ryan, here I would ask you also in your capacity, this very, very unique capacity nowadays, because you work under EU-funded projects, working with cities and working with city advisors, but you also represent the private sector. And I'm wondering to what an extent this experience over the last probably already a year or so has maybe shifted your perception of what developing and implementing projects is on the city side, and how maybe we can find even more effective ways of private investors, private sector, and cities working together based on this experience.
Yeah, thanks, Sylvia. I think it's a really interesting point, and there's a common theme in what's been said already, is not necessarily a reluctance to work with the private sector or private capital, but the fear of being taken advantage of. And I think one of the big things that needs to shift when we talk about technical assistance and capacity building is not only teaching everyone what a green bond is or what other solutions are out there, city funds, revolving funds, and so on and so forth, but actually starting to support them in the room where negotiations take place so that cities, regions, municipalities are negotiating from a position of strength rather than weakness, a position where you're fully informed rather than going in almost with a blindfold on. And I think once those discussions take place at that level where you are negotiating with all of the information and from that position of strength, suddenly the dynamics change. Suddenly the private sector does actually have to take on a suitable amount of the risk for the reward that they're getting. Suddenly the city gets some of the reward instead of having to foot the cost and the risk of things going wrong without actually getting much of the upside. So that's something I think is the next stage of that capacity building and technical assistance, is being able to support cities in the room where those discussions take place, and then in the future, cities having that capacity from leveraging the experience on the ground themselves to do that themselves more and more. And that is a focus of, obviously, institutions at the EU level and the programs such as Prospect Plus, but also, I think, has a role at the national level too, particularly when it comes to standardization of templates and frameworks, for example. I think one of the things that we're seeing, and this goes back to your question, as I know I've got off on a bit of a tangent, one of the things that's very different between the way cities operate right now, although it is changing, versus the private sector, is many years ago, on the private sector side, there was a rationalization of the deployment of balance sheets. There was a increased sophistication as to how you utilize funds and different financial products. I think on the city side that is now growing, but I think it has been slower to do so. And so it's actually cities that are not necessarily putting their best foot forward in terms of the utilization of those balance sheets. And this goes to the point in the previous panel of, it's a necessity to use private finance, it's a necessity to use alternative financing solutions. If you picture a public funding budget of, say, 20 million euros, and you have two projects at 20 million euros each, one might be retrofitting a school, for example, or all the schools within the municipality. Another might be electrifying the bus network. Which one do you pick? If you pick one, there's benefits, and there's also cons of not picking the other, right? But you can have both if you leverage private funds, right? You can have 50% public funding that may provide subsidies, it may provide some of the potential return potential, but at the same time, you're leveraging private capital or private sector to be able to have both of them operating in the city. So it really allows the money that you do receive from public funds to be stretched further. And I think that's the real key distinction there. So that's where I see the shift happening, but is the difference previously. You have a more thorough and in-depth toolkit that is being utilized in the private sector, which more and more we'll see start to be rolled out in the public side.
And I'm curious, was there anything in particular that really surprised you when you started working with cities in this new capacity, a little bit different, and you really had not expected that this is how it works when you work for a city?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think the one thing that is a positive surprise at the municipal and city level is the innovation is there. People are thinking differently and creatively and out of the box, but it's how you deploy that, which is sometimes where you end up with the bottlenecks and the disconnects. So I think helping, empowering cities to achieve what actually are their ideas at the end of the day is something that's a positive surprise coming into this from being in the private sector, where you probably do have the view that actually maybe cities are a bit more driven by the national level, or maybe cities are a bit more reliant on the private sector for the innovation component. Actually, the cities have a lot of it. It's just how that gets deployed, which is the big difference.
Thanks a lot. And Petra, I'm looking at you, because also we talked about your struggles now, thinking about de-risking and being more attractive to private investors, looking how to bundle projects, etc. Could you tell us a little bit about your experience, what's happening in The Hague right now, and how you are approaching this?
Yeah, thank you, Sylvia. It's on one hand, we do things very good. I think we have several revolving funds that really are helping a project to succeed. For example, invest in geothermal heat sources, for example, and it is working. So this is something that we have done very well. The barrier on that side is that, for example, we have several funds, and in a district you have so many different kinds of problems that it is almost like a one-issue fund. So if we would have funds that had more broader issues that we could address, then it would make it easier. So it could be more place-based. On the other hand, a big part of The Hague, it's very suitable for district heating. That is a good solution to come to climate neutrality. And we started the start of a big tendering process. And what we see over there is that it's a chicken and egg that you're dealing with, because you have to deploy the heat source. This is by private companies. Then and they have a huge upfront investments and also risks to address. Then you have the grid. For now, it's like more, you have the private grid operators, but the law is changing. So these companies need to take risks, and that is impossible because maybe in like several years they have to sell their company to the government because it should be owned by the government, so publicly owned. Then it's the city is very densely populated, the most densely populated built city of the Netherlands, so the costs are really high. Then those grids, they end on the front door of people, of households. You have the housing corporations that you can deal with, but you have to connect those to the grid and take their planning moment when they renovate their housings and use that moment to connect to the grids. It is possible, but there are difficulties because you need the subsidies, you need investments, and it has to all be planned at the same moment. Then you have homeowners associations. We have like 22,000 homeowners associations within one city. And each have their own regulatory process. So like 70% of the homeowners need to agree with the renovations they need to make, because if you want to be connected to the grid, you have also to reduce your energy use. So you have to take the insulation measures. And there are people living there in a different stage of life, with different Some have no savings at all. So it is really complicated to get them all on the one page because they have to decide together how to do it. And we have to, the whole chain, you have to address at the same time and make a planning of it. And also to get all those instruments outlined there. So in such a, like, we tried to do it in a big way, but we couldn't because all the risks were addressed to the government. And we had to, like 50,000 euros per household we have to invest just to connect to the grid. And even the households had to invest as well. So it wasn't possible to do so. So now we're trying to look at smaller scale projects, like for 500 households. And that looks a little bit better. And we have a very sympathetic project, like building a heat collector beneath an artificial sport field and then connect surrounding buildings to it, like one football field. You can connect to like 400 households. And this is something that's very sympathetic because people are doing the sporting in those fields, and they are, seeing how they can benefit from it. So you have benefits also for social cohesion. And my question is also, how can you monetize those social co-benefits? Is that possible? How can we do so? And how can we stay, connected to all our citizens when those projects are taking so long, for many years? We can ask them, are you interested in connecting to the grid? How much does it cost you? We don't know it yet. Okay, so how? But then we have to invest in our buildings. Are we able to connect our citizens to projects that are taking so long? So these are different barriers that we are now seeing, but also solutions. And it would be very great if we can find some of those solutions here. And I'm very happy we have started conversations with the EIB recently, and they're trying to help with those different kind of projects to, like the assistance technically maybe, but mostly financially, and how to structure, and also like a second opinion to the work that we are already doing. So maybe we can find a way out to all those problems, challenges that are interconnected. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. What I hear from you, and it's really interesting, because we often in the debate talk about moving away from pilots and looking at large scale, right? But myself, what I hear from you is that actually you still need the pilots. You still need the pilots to convince people, to convince your decision makers, etc. And I think these are two different approaches that we really need to consider. Marcin, I wanted to ask about your opinion on this. Warsaw is the largest city in Poland, so it's, the situation in Warsaw is different than some other cities or municipalities. How do you see that? Do you also see the value in pilots, or would you like to, are you ready to move to large scale? You have prepared just recently an investment, very ambitious and complex investment plan towards climate neutrality and climate change contract, climate city contract. You working on finding different ways, and yet there are also still some barriers that you are facing. How do you see that compares with what's been said before?
Mm-hmm. Very good question, to be honest. Why do we have to call it pilots? Why not learning in practice? Or why not, the circle of projects or whatever? The pilot gives you, a bit of feeling that it's like one project that will be at the end left behind, that we start 10 others. But then, if you have a mandate and political buy-in for your decisions, you can be flexible. And I mean, in a previous panel, you mentioned coal stoves. we came from the same country, Poland, coal-based economy, a lot of single boilers, coal boilers, and we as a city are beneficiary of funds, but we also provide funding and subsidiaries. And this is one of the examples. I mean, the biggest success in Poland was in Warsaw. We eliminated over 90% of our coal boilers. Why? How it happened? It didn't happen overnight. It took 8 years, I would say, from the very beginning to this point right now. But the main success factor there was being flexible. So it's a very small scale of what is happening now in the EU funds level. So we were able to change the rules and eligibility criteria and the local law a couple of times during the whole period. So first of all, we decided to eliminate or to lower the income threshold, for example, to invite more people so they can be eligible. Then we have a lot of clients, but we observed a bit slowdown, so we decided to change the ownership of property requirement. So you don't have to be ownership, you have to have an agreement from the owner, and that kind of actions. At the same time, we were very client-oriented, so we were not saying, here is the pool of funds, and then if you want to reach out for them, you're stupid people and you don't want to spend money for your investment. It would be easy answer, right? We provide that instrument, people are not interested, not our problem. But it doesn't give results, positive results at the end. If you want to deliver, you have to focus about the goal, and if you're goal-oriented, then you have to be very into user experience, and you have to hear the feedback from people, or why it's not convenient, why you are not reaching for funds that we provided, etc. And that was one of the best factors. And I think that was a pilot. No, we changed the whole process a couple of times. But I would call it learning in progress rather. Then maybe I don't want to spend too much time focusing on barriers, but we have also a lot of fragmentation regarding projects. So we have, we are into ELENA, we are into ERF during retrofit. So we don't have, 200 policy officers on bench waiting for another option to come. Our bandwidth is pretty full right now, so the fragmentation of options, it's an issue. And also fragmentation of scope of the projects or the eligibility criteria. So we have a lot of investments in the retrofit, in the building sector, which is the main emission source in Warsaw. But for example, adopting to accessibility standards are not eligible, or introducing the climate resilience projects in the area, not in the building. It's not eligible, so we have to apply for another source of funding, and another, and we have to report in each one of these, and we have to do a lot of paperwork. Regarding the business, the introducing business or private investors, we hear a lot about that, but it's very, we don't go really deep into the issue, because we hear about the need, and we know the public sources are limited, but at the same time it also consumes a lot of resources. We prioritize the sources that we know pretty well. We are used to it. We don't have to learn again, and so on and so forth. And as the private bank are offering loans, or the other institutions are offering loans, we prioritize that over the business. Nevertheless, we cooperate with the private sector on a smaller scale. So we leverage the funds, do some crowdfunding, that was called it on a slide, and it's pretty successful, but not in a large scale, because it's a new issue. We don't know the issue pretty well. So we would need the due diligence first, and then speak about how to organize that process. So we have to take a step back regarding that.
Thanks a lot. And I have a question a bit linked to that, actually to all of you, apart from you, Ryan. In terms of what you feel still lack as local authorities to know more about working with the private sector. And I'm not talking about the banks, because we know there are free subsidies and free money subsidies, and then there are banks, national banks, etc. But to really look at other instruments. In your case, Vlasta, you have tons of experience with EPC, but there are other options as well. So I'm wondering what, on your level, might be the main things that we need to tackle, or you need to tackle, both capacity-wise, maybe your local administrative processes, or maybe more of a cultural context in the country. Are some things you could mention, that just briefly, maybe giving us a few keywords?
Yeah, I think the cooperation within the authority. So we found out that in previous years, 10, 20 years ago, with the energy refurbishment, it was done only the technical department, planning and then implementing. But today, working with not only energy, but climate adaptation, resilience, financing mechanisms, urban developments, digitalizations, smart specialization. You really need that the whole authority, different departments are cooperating, understanding each other. And I think this is a challenge. This is something that was, many years we were quite rigid in the authority. This is our work, the same template for 20 years. But now you have to be flexible, you have to understand, and you have to listen. And I think this is this proactive role of public sector. We are not there yet. We try to be some more, some less, but I think this proactivity. And just to reflect, yes, I agree. We don't call it pilot project. I still do, but I think that your saying that this is learning and doing cycle is really what it is. It's not only the pilot. So yeah, thank you. I will try to use it, not pilot anymore.
The world would be a better place if we allow people to make mistakes, no? So that's all about making mistakes and taking the lessons from that. So it's not, such conferences and, meetings, workshops are very often focused about success stories, and how do we call it? The disaster stories are also very, very insightful to not make the same mistakes again and again.
But on this, can I ask you, by making mistakes, do you mean for people working for cities, actually not being afraid of making a mistake, not having to face the legal, regulatory, reputational consequences of being responsible for maybe misspending a little bit of money, which of course we don't want to happen, but that blocks the way of or the degree of innovation that people are willing to try? Is that something that you meant, or is it more of a...
Yes, it is. It is. We have to
goes back to the national level and more support from the national level towards making...
Also, but also from our inhabitants. At the end, in my case, Warsaw mayor is always a political figure. Now he is a candidate for the national presidential election, so everything is political now. And we have to be, it is very fragile, and now it's not a good environment to make mistakes and to find, different or innovative options. Now it's about having a solid grant and good political buy-in. But at the end, even out of the political election cycle, it is pretty important to have people behind you and to get that buy-in from the local organizations, local inhabitants, because at the end they are voting at the elections. And it is also very important nowadays, and I think we live in a very special moment when we should stop calling projects, climate-related, greenhouse gas reduction, or climate neutrality, tralala, that in our bubble is pretty fine, but outside of our bubble, if you're sitting there, you're probably inside of that. It doesn't ring the bell, it doesn't resonate now. Climate is becoming less and less popular, less and less important. Now we should focus about safety, about stable economy. And for me, at the end, it's the same story, but different name. So take advantage of that and start calling projects, stop calling it, we are a part of net zero, so 100 missions towards net zero, but what about stable local economy and energy safety? Yeah, so that also gives you a better political buy-in from the local residents. it's not a Green Deal, which is the nightmare of Poles now because of many reasons. It's about safety, it's about being stable and living in a good economy.
Changing a narrative, that is really, really important. Yes, we are. Yeah.
Marco, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I think going back to the question itself, something that we saw that's really important is the capacity building on the long-term monitoring of the processes. So the energy performance contract is not a fit and forget process. So then you need like 10, sometimes 8, 10 years of monitoring. And myself, it happened that we were checking lighting, EPC, and there were no shared benefits that were actually shared. So there are a lot of losses for the municipalities and also for the stakeholders that take this part, because obviously private sector is always monitoring that because there's a profit behind it, there is the business case, but municipalities sometimes, okay, we spent a lot of time doing a pile of work and pile of paper, and then we start and then sometimes forget, or people change in the municipality and the people that work there, so there is a need of sometimes also standardization. We don't see a lot of ISO methodology, ISO 50001, that's more common, for example, for businesses and companies, but not in most of the small municipalities. There's nothing like that. So it's still a long process from what I see, but something really important. And we see the frustration from municipality workers and political figures that they are afraid to engage with these processes because they are afraid of the long term and not having the people trained enough. So again, having partners like energy agencies, they see a more trustworthy process and they can rely on a longer term over the political term as well. So the process that goes on for 10 years, at least 2 terms if it started at the very beginning. So they need these kind of partners to go on sometimes.
I don't know. Yeah, what I also would like to stress is that we are trying now to find new solutions on, involve new organizations. Like, we're not used to work with health insurance companies, but they benefit also from installation programs. So we're trying now to talk with them and see how we can involve them. We don't have a solution yet, but we're trying. We're trying also with the organizations that are providing the mortgages for housing, that they benefit too when the houses are in a good situation, in a good state. So we trying to find this kind of solutions, and but we need more. Also, for example, pension funds. Of course, we are far too small, like one city, but we are working together with the other Dutch mission cities, and together, we have a big portfolio in projects, and then we might be far more interesting for other type of institutions like pension funds. And we would love to have received more help from the European Commission and from the EIB to get us help with structure our financially structure our projects and involve other type of institutions and to make things work better. And also, at the end, we do it for the citizens. And for now, what we see in our projects, that maybe there are a lot of projects that are for, like district heating, they are for society, are the cheapest solution to go to climate neutrality. But for the end user, for the citizens, they pay more than for the current, in the current situation, but also might pay more for other solutions. So we have to address that problem as well, because that's not a fair way for them to. And we've also a pretty amount of poverty within in the city, like 11%. Well, average in the Netherlands it's like 6%. So these are things that we need to deal. That it should be a just transition, and that everyone can be part of it. Yeah.
And Ryan, since Petra just mentioned the new types of institutions that cities need to start looking into working with and the changing situation, how much flexibility is there, do you think, on the private sector side as well? Is the private sector also changing? Private investors, are they open to change as well, to meet cities somewhere in the middle? Of course, the approach and the expectations are different, but is it something that you think is also being adjusted and adapted to the situation?
Yeah, a really good question. 2 points on that. I suppose one thing is the private sector is always good at changing and always good at innovating. So if there are ideas that cities have, typically the private sector is a good starting point for engagement because they may be able to support you on those endeavors. And actually, I think the key distinction is actually, has been mentioned here, municipalities and cities, you're operating on behalf at the end of the day of your residents. And at the end of the day, the citizens are the people that are the beneficiaries, but also the people that, if there's any things that stall or issues, that have to bear the brunt of that. Whereas the private sector is beholden to shareholders. And typically those will be pension funds, they will be big investment banks and so on and so forth that have already in their investments put in a kind of risk mechanism for accepting failure on some of their investments. So I think that's something that should be leveraged more on that side. And then in terms of the flexibility and willingness of the private sector to work and engage in new structures with municipalities, cities, regions, and so on, I think they have to, for 2 reasons. One is corporations themselves, particularly in Europe, but even more so in the US, I think, although at the moment, maybe, in fact, I'll steer clear of a political discussion there, but prior to January of this year, there was a big push in the US about sustainability reporting for corporations there too. So the private sector has to start addressing the concerns and make themselves more sustainable. And one of the ways of doing that is these innovations. And the other point of that is, when it comes to private capital, it's an endless frontier that moves as to how to deploy capital to cities and to new investment opportunities. I think as the emergence of private capital and private credit over the last couple of years shows, that will never stop. The innovation is always there. And so cities and municipalities is a new frontier in a way, jumping into that kind of market. And it's something that the US has had for a long time. The municipal bond market in the US, for example, is huge. And cities have got very good at leveraging that to their own strengths. But when those discussions and these innovative solutions are being deployed, it needs to be, and this goes back to the point of cities need to be benefiting too. So it's meeting somewhere in the middle that works for the private sector, private financial organizations, but also for the cities, and at the end of the day, the citizens of those cities too.
Thanks a lot. We need to wrap up, but before we do, I would love to ask you just for like literally half a sentence on what we can actually do with these recommendations, because we've done a lot of effort promoting our survey, putting together the results for you, then organizing this today, right? But we want to trigger more discussion and not end at triggering discussion. We want it to be useful. And what do you think can be most useful? What is it that we can do with what we have learned so far that can be most useful from your position, your background in your countries, your sectors, etc.?
Yeah, I will say, yeah, the findings and the discussion today with all the panels, I think these are very good information that could be really put together and send out to the different organizations. Firstly, there are a lot of them on EU level that cover somehow the cities, regions, and municipalities. Because I think all this information now should come to the really different levels, to the last one, the smallest municipalities. I think the translation today is not difficult. So I think because the language barrier is still there, even if there is a lot of options that we could use and translate. So I think, yes, this information, this guidelines, these ideas should come down. And then I think, especially because different organizations are involved, European Commission, other organization, Committee of Region, that we all, if we are somehow linked to this organization, that we spit from bottom to up and from up, down, back from the us that are on the top level. So I think this could be one solution.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I think it would be similar pretty. I mean, combine the outcome of the projects and outcome of discussion to one piece of paper, one page. Put that into envelope, build a coalition of the Eurocities-like organizations across the Brussels and the EU level and local levels, and then push and lobby to the Commission and to the decision makers at the highest level. But it must be a one page of paper translated from the project language to easy to digest language, or the language that policymakers could understand, and then with the coalition, with the mandate of many parties, push that into decision makers, and then expect at least some answer. Even if the answer is no, we won't consider that, then that's a good answer, because then it gives you another, another push to do the same, or to use that and leverage that motivation to cope with the problem, the issue.
Yeah, based on that, something different could be to probably use the new media as well. And now there is a big hype on podcast, for example. So progress with maybe some podcast events and do interviews with high-level talks, one-to-one or groups, could be also interesting, because now it's quite a thing to do podcasts, and it's quite listened. So maybe it's not only social media posts, but also these kind of more in-depth dialogues that not everyone can join an event like this, but the podcast is more reachable to other people. So that could be a suggestion for the outcomes.
Maybe a little bit another point of view. I agree completely, of course, but maybe you can also facilitate more discussions, because as municipalities we have to change, we have to innovate how we are organized, how we do the finance. But I think that the financial institutions need to innovate as well with their new products, with new solutions, and maybe it would be great if you could help those discussions also, and maybe also within the EU, that you think in a different way. Yeah, it's a lot to ask, but but it is. I think we cannot afford more to lose so much time, because it's, there's so many challenges that we need to address, and we have to have new solutions, also with heat stress, with it's too much. So we need to change ourselves, and we need also the other institutions to make the change together and to come on the same page with more the same language, because we don't understand each other nowadays, and that is important to change.
So from my side, 2 points. One, unity is strength, and I think this covers basically what all of you have said. There's been so much information exchange today, so many ideas, so many recommendations, but if all you do is go home and work on one of those ideas in a silo, then we're failing. At the city level, it's about engaging different departments, developing teams of willing, enthusiastic individuals that are willing to work together on an investment program and a development of that. At the regional level and national level, it's leveraging those cities that are looking to lead the way to become a connected voice that can speak on the national level and beyond. At the EU level, it's leveraging the programs such as Prospect Plus, such as Net Zero Cities, the EUCF, and so on and so forth, to develop the technical assistance and the capacity, really, at the end of the day, within cities. And then also the city networks, so Eurocities is a fine example, leveraging the opportunities there. Oh, of course, yes. Leveraging those opportunities to be a united voice. So that's point one, is unity is strength. And point two is, and this is something that I think has to happen at the European level, but also at the national level, is I'd really like to see white label solutions come to the market. So, like you've said, there's so much time that's spent on creating bespoke solutions at the city level, but really, if it has to be the national level due to the 27 different regulatory and legal jurisdictions, then fine. But really, at the European level, we could be start having those conversations too. But there should be very clear templates and structures for the development of city funds. There should be very clear, sensible blended capital solutions. There should be very clear routes to issuing of green bonds, sustainability-linked bonds, and so on and so forth. That takes a lot of the time and effort out of the resource-constrained municipalities to a point where you can select those options, and actually a lot of the groundwork is done for you. So I think that's one of the big things that needs to change as well.
Thank you very much for such constructive and useful and interesting feedback, and I think it's really like a plan for us, for all of us here who work on these issues. Interesting, exciting. It sounds like a lot of work to do, but I don't think we can give up, because this is really something that's happening. And going back to this quote from one of our participants, it really helps to work together, and really, like you said, working in silos, we tend to do that because we are also busy, right? It's easier to talk to our colleagues, but we don't solve problems when we just talk within our organizations, and I think this is something where we can really all improve. Thank you very much. And now we still have a few minutes for the final closing, and I will give the mic back to Diana.
Thank you.